There is a moment just before the world falls asleep when everything becomes softer. The light fades into something gentler. The noise of the day dissolves into whispers. And somewhere across this vast planet, millions of creatures are doing exactly what you're about to do. They're finding their place of rest. They're surrendering to the night. But here's what most people don't know. While we toss and turn, checking our phones, wondering if we'll ever fall asleep, there are animals out there who have mastered something we've completely forgotten. They've learned to trust the darkness. They've discovered ways to sleep that seem impossible, almost magical. Some sleep while flying thousands of feet in the air. Others sleep with only half their brain, keeping one eye open to the world. There are creatures who sleep for 8 months straight, their hearts beating just once per minute, their bodies colder than ice, yet still alive. And tonight, I want to take you on a journey through their world, because somewhere between the sloth hanging motionless in the rainforest and the dolphin floating in moonlit waters, there's a secret, a truth about rest that we've lost in our modern lives. These animals don't fight sleep, they don't fear it. They've turned it into an art form, a survival strategy, a moment of pure peace in a dangerous world. Imagine being able to sleep while soaring over an endless ocean, trusting nothing but the wind beneath your wings. Imagine sleeping so deeply that winter passes by in what feels like a single dream. Imagine building yourself a new bed every single night with your own hands, making it perfect, making it yours. These aren't fantasies. This is happening right now all around us in ways that scientists are only beginning to understand. But there's something else, something I discovered while researching these animals that changed the way I think about my own sleep. You see, every single one of these creatures, from the tiniest bee to the largest whale, has figured out one crucial thing. They've learned that rest isn't weakness, it's not time wasted. It's the most important thing they do, more important than hunting, more important than exploring, because without proper rest, nothing else matters. The predator becomes prey, the flyer falls from the sky, the swimmer drowns in the very water that once held them safe. And maybe that's why you're here right now, listening to this. Maybe some part of you remembers what these animals never forgot, that sleep is sacred, that rest is natural, that there's beauty in simply closing your eyes and letting go. So, what happens when a bird decides to sleep while flying at 10,000 feet? What keeps the dolphin from drowning when half its brain shuts down? And why do some of nature's largest animals barely sleep at all, while the smallest creatures dream for hours? The answers will surprise you. They might even change you. Hey guys, tonight we begin with the remarkable world of animals and their extraordinary ways of finding rest and peace in nature. The gentle creatures who have mastered the art of relaxation in ways we're only beginning to understand, from clever sleeping positions to fascinating survival strategies that bring them comfort. Their story is one of adaptation, beauty, and harmony with the natural world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Get into your blanket, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin in a place where time moves differently, where the very air seems thicker, warmer, filled with the scent of rain and earth, the rainforest, and high up in the canopy, where the branches interweave like fingers clasping together, there lives a creature who has turned slowness into wisdom, the sloth. If you've ever seen one, even in a video, you know there's something almost otherworldly about them. The way they move, if you can even call it movement, feels like watching life in slow motion. But what you might not know is that this slowness isn't laziness, it's mastery. It's one of nature's most brilliant survival strategies. And when it comes to sleep, the sloth has achieved something close to perfection. A sloth sleeps between 15 and 20 hours every single day. Let that sink in for a moment. While we struggle to get our recommended 8 hours, while we set alarms and drink coffee and force ourselves awake, the sloth spends most of its existence in a state of rest. And here's the beautiful part: it's not sleeping because it's tired, it's sleeping because it's smart. You see, the sloth's diet consists almost entirely of leaves. Just leaves, and leaves, as it turns out, are one of the lowest calorie foods in nature. They're tough to digest, provide minimal energy, and take days to break down in the sloth's multi chambered stomach. So the sloth made a choice. Over millions of years of evolution, if I can't get much energy from my food, then I simply won't use much energy at all. I'll sleep, I'll rest, I'll hang here in my tree and let the world rush by below me. And so it does. The sloth sleeps curled into itself, its long arms wrapped around a branch, its curved claws locked in place like natural hooks. Even in deep sleep, it doesn't fall. It can't fall. Its grip is so strong that sloths have been found still hanging from branches long after death, held there by the same claws that held them safely through countless nights of dreams. But there's more magic to the sloth's sleep than just its position. Look closely at a sleeping sloth, and you might notice something strange growing on its fur, a slight green tint, especially visible in the rainy season. That's algae, living algae, growing right there on the sloth's body, turning it into a mobile ecosystem. And this isn't an accident or a sign of poor hygiene. It's camouflage. The green tint helps the sloth blend perfectly into the leafy canopy, invisible to the eagles and jaguars that hunt below and above. Even while sleeping, the sloth is protected by the very forest it lives in. The sloth's heart beats slowly too, just 40 to 50 beats per minute when it's resting. Compare that to a human heart, pumping 70 times per minute even when we're calm, and you begin to understand the depth of the sloth's relaxation. Every system in its body has downshifted into the lowest gear possible. Its breathing is shallow, quiet, barely noticeable. Its metabolism has slowed to a crawl. It exists in a state between waking and sleeping that most of us will never experience. And here's something that seems almost impossible. The three-toed sloth can rotate its head 270 degrees. Like an owl, it can look almost completely behind itself without moving its body at all. Scientists believe this ability helps the sloth keep watch for predators, even while dozing, turning its head slowly, dreamily, checking the branches around it without ever fully waking up. Imagine being able to stay aware of your surroundings while deep in sleep, your consciousness split between the dream world and the real one. The rainforest canopy rocks gently in the wind, and the sloth rocks with it. The branch becomes a cradle. The leaves provide a lullaby, rustling softly in the warm breeze. Sometimes rain falls, heavy tropical rain that would wake any other creature, but the sloth barely notices. Its thick fur sheds water efficiently, and the rhythm of raindrops becomes just another part of the symphony of sleep. There's something deeply philosophical about the sloth's existence. In a world that constantly tells us to hurry up, to do more, to be productive every waking moment, the sloth offers a different teaching. What if the secret to survival isn't speed, but stillness? What if rest isn't the opposite of success, but the foundation of it? The sloth has been around for millions of years, outlasting countless other species that burned bright and fast and then disappeared. The sloth remained, hanging peacefully in its tree, sleeping through ages, surviving through rest. Mother sloths sleep with their babies clinging to their chests, small fuzzy versions of themselves, learning from birth that slowness is safety, that sleep is strength. The baby sloth will stay with its mother for up to a year, and during that time it learns the locations of the best trees, the safest branches, the perfect spots to curl up when the sun gets too hot or the night grows too dark. It learns the art of sleeping while the world spins on without concern. But even in this peaceful scene, there's an edge of survival. The sloth must wake eventually, about once a week. It makes the dangerous journey down from the canopy to the forest floor to defecate. This is when it's most vulnerable, moving slowly across the ground where jaguars hunt. Scientists still don't fully understand why sloths risk this journey instead of simply releasing waste from the trees. Some believe it's to fertilize the specific trees they feed from, a slow act of gratitude to the forest that sustains them. Even the sloth's bathroom habits are part of a larger cycle of care and connection. Then, task complete, the sloth climbs slowly back up, its muscles burning with the effort of moving at all, until it reaches its branch again, and it sleeps. It curls back into that perfect position, claws locked, body swaying gently, and it returns to the dream. The forest breathes around it. The canopy whispers. Time slows down to almost nothing. And you have to wonder, as you lie there listening to this, what the sloth dreams about. Does it dream at all? Or is its sleep so deep, so complete, that dreams aren't necessary? Does it see the forest from above, green and endless? Does it feel the warmth of the sun through the leaves, the coolness of rain on its fur? Or is there simply darkness, peace, the absence of thought itself? But the sloth, as perfect as its sleep may be, is just the beginning, because while it rests high in the trees, breathing slowly, heart barely beating, there are other creatures facing a completely different challenge. How do you sleep when you live in the water? When stopping to rest means you might sink? When closing both eyes means you might become someone's meal? The answer is stranger than anything you've imagined, and it's waiting for us in the next part of our journey, down below the surface, where the ocean holds secrets that rewrite everything we thought we knew about sleep itself. The ocean at night is a different world entirely. The surface reflects the moon like polished glass, and beneath it, in waters that stretch down into absolute darkness, something remarkable is happening. Creatures are resting, but not in any way you'd recognize. They're performing one of nature's most sophisticated acts of survival, a biological miracle that seems to defy every rule of sleep we know. Dolphins never fully close their eyes. Not really, not both at once. When a dolphin sleeps, half of its brain shuts down completely while the other half stays wide awake. Scientists call this unihemispheric slow wave sleep, but that clinical term doesn't capture the poetry of what's actually occurring. One hemisphere of the brain produces the slow rolling waves of deep sleep, while the other hemisphere remains alert, watching, breathing, keeping the animal alive. Think about that for a moment. Half of you is dreaming, while the other half is conscious. Half of you has surrendered to rest, while the other half maintains complete awareness of your surroundings. It's not multitasking, it's something far stranger. It's existing in two states simultaneously, a kind of living paradox that shouldn't work but does, beautifully, every single night. The reason for this split consciousness is simple yet profound. Dolphins are voluntary breathers, unlike us who breathe automatically even in our deepest sleep. Dolphins must choose each breath. They must consciously swim to the surface, consciously open their blowhole, consciously pull air into their lungs. If both halves of the brain fell asleep at once, the dolphin would sink slowly into the depths and drown in the very element that sustains it. So evolution found a solution. Sleep one half at a time. Let one eye close while the other stays open, literally watching the world go by. The open eye doesn't blink. It tracks movement in the water. It monitors the pod. It stays connected to reality, while the other half of the mind wanders through whatever dreams dolphins have. Researchers studying bottlenose dolphins discovered they rest for about 8 hours a day, but never all at once. They take short naps throughout a 24-hour period, each lasting anywhere from a few minutes to an hour. During these rest periods, they swim slowly in circles or float just below the surface, barely moving, conserving energy while remaining ready to flee from sharks or engage with their pod members who are in their waking phase. And here's what makes it even more fascinating. The two hemispheres take turns. After a few hours, they switch. The rested half wakes up and takes over the job of breathing and watching, while the previously alert half finally gets its chance to sink into sleep. It's a relay race that never ends, each side of the brain passing the baton of consciousness back and forth, neither side ever getting a moment of complete surrender. Baby dolphins face an even more intense version of this challenge. Newborn calves don't sleep at all for the first month of life. They can't afford to. They're learning to breathe, learning to swim, learning to nurse, and every moment of distraction could be fatal. The mother dolphin doesn't sleep much either during this time, staying alert to guide her calf, nudging it to the surface, teaching it the rhythms of ocean life. After that first month, the calf begins to adopt the half brain sleep pattern, entering into the same split existence that will define the rest of its life. But dolphins aren't alone in this strange sleep adaptation. Whales do it too, these massive creatures who dwarf almost everything else in the ocean. Sperm whales, in particular, have developed one of the most surreal sleeping positions ever documented in nature. They sleep vertically. Picture it. You're diving deep into the ocean, the light from above growing dimmer with each meter you descend. And then, in the blue-green darkness, you see them, a pod of sperm whales, each one over 40 feet long, floating upright in the water column. They're perfectly still, their massive heads pointing up toward the distant surface, their bodies suspended in the water like enormous living monuments. They look like an underwater forest of ancient sleeping giants. Scientists only discovered this behavior in 2008, quite by accident, when a research vessel nearly collided with a group of motionless sperm whales. Before that, no one knew they slept this way. The whales drift vertically for periods of 10 to 15 minutes at a time, completely unresponsive to boats passing nearby. Their breathing stops during these rest periods, and they rely on the oxygen stored in their blood and muscles. Then, suddenly, as if an invisible alarm has gone off, they wake and return to the surface to breathe. These vertical sleeping sessions are brief because they have to be. A sperm whale can hold its breath for up to 90 minutes when diving for food, but during sleep, the body's systems are even more relaxed, using oxygen more slowly, but also unable to actively seek more. So they sleep in short bursts, never allowing themselves to drift too deep or stay under too long. It's a careful balance between rest and survival. Gray whales migrate thousands of miles each year, and during these journeys, their sleep becomes even more fragmented. They might rest for just a few minutes at a time, always moving forward, always progressing toward their destination. Mother whales with calves sleep even less, staying vigilant against orcas and other predators who see the young whales as easy prey. Then there are the sea otters, who bring an entirely different kind of magic to the concept of oceanic sleep. Sea otters sleep floating on their backs at the surface, their thick fur trapping air to keep them buoyant. But they face a problem that dolphins and whales don't have to worry about. They're small enough and light enough that ocean currents can carry them away from their feeding grounds while they rest. They could wake up miles from where they fell asleep, separated from their family group, lost in the vastness of the Pacific. So sea otters do something that looks almost impossibly adorable, but is actually a serious survival strategy. They hold hands while they sleep, or more accurately, they hold paws. A group of resting otters will link their front paws together, creating a raft of floating bodies that's much harder for the current to scatter. They anchor themselves to each other, trusting that the group will stay together even as individuals drift in and out of consciousness. Sometimes they use another method. They wrap themselves in kelp, the long strands of seaweed that grow in dense forests along the coast. An otter will spin itself several times, winding the kelp around its body like a natural rope, tethering itself to the ocean floor far below. The kelp holds it in place, preventing it from drifting, allowing it to sleep with the assurance that it won't wake in unfamiliar waters. There's something deeply moving about these strategies. The hand holding, the kelp wrapping, they speak to a need that goes beyond simple biology. They're about connection, about trust, about the recognition that survival sometimes means admitting you need help, that you can't do everything alone. The sleeping otter, floating peacefully on its back, paws clasped with its neighbor, represents a kind of vulnerability that's rare in nature. It says, I am resting now, and I trust you to be here when I wake. Sea otters spend about 11 hours a day resting and grooming, and during their rest periods, their heart rate drops significantly. Their thick fur, the densest of any mammal on Earth, with up to 1 million hairs per square inch, keeps them warm even as they float in cold northern waters. They often place their paws over their eyes while sleeping, blocking out the light, creating their own little darkness, even in the bright afternoon sun. The ocean rocks them gently, the same motion that rocks the dolphins swimming slowly in their half sleep below, the same motion that suspends the sperm whales in their vertical dreams. It's a universal lullaby, the rise and fall of waves, the rhythm that has existed since before life crawled onto land. These marine mammals have never left that rhythm. They've adapted to it, built their entire sleep cycles around it, turned the challenge of breathing air while living in water into an art form. And maybe that's the lesson here, that the ocean, for all its danger and vastness and depth, has also become a cradle for those who learn to rest within it. The dolphins with their split minds, the whales with their vertical vigils, the otters with their joined paws, they've all found their own way to surrender to sleep without surrendering to the sea itself. They've learned to trust the water that could drown them, to close one eye while keeping the other open, to rest while remaining just alert enough to survive. But what about places where water isn't the challenge? What about environments so harsh, so cold, so deadly that sleep itself seems impossible? What happens when the temperature drops so far below freezing that merely existing becomes a battle, let alone finding rest? The answer takes us somewhere even stranger than the ocean depths. It takes us to a place where winter lasts for 8 months and darkness swallows the world, where animals don't just sleep differently, they sleep through entire seasons, their bodies shutting down to a degree that seems incompatible with life itself, waiting in a state that's closer to death than dreams, and somehow, impossibly, they survive. There are places on this planet where winter doesn't just arrive, it conquers, it transforms the landscape into something alien, burying everything under snow and ice, driving the temperature so low that exposed skin freezes in minutes. The Arctic tundra in winter is one of these places. The wind howls across empty plains. The sun barely rises, and when it does, it provides light but no warmth. Everything living either leaves or dies, except for those who have learned to sleep through it. The Arctic ground squirrel has achieved something that seems to violate the basic laws of biology. When autumn approaches and the days grow short, this small creature retreats underground into a burrow it spent the summer preparing. It curls into a tight ball, its tail wrapped around its body, and it begins to shut down, not just falling asleep, actually shutting down, system by system, function by function, until it exists in a state that's barely distinguishable from death. Its body temperature drops from a normal 98 degrees Fahrenheit down to minus 3 degrees Celsius, below freezing. The squirrel's body is literally colder than ice, yet somehow it doesn't freeze solid. The water in its cells doesn't crystallize and rupture the cell walls. It remains liquid, or at least liquid enough, protected by a kind of biological antifreeze that scientists are still trying to fully understand. The squirrel's heart, which normally beats 300 times per minute during its active summer life, slows to just 1 beat per minute. 1 beat, 60 seconds passing between each contraction. If you were watching the squirrel hibernate and you checked for a heartbeat at the wrong moment, you might think it was dead. You'd place your hand against its tiny chest and feel nothing. Wait, still nothing. And then finally, a single weak pulse, followed by another minute of absolute stillness. Its breathing becomes almost undetectable. It might take one breath every few minutes, sometimes going 5 minutes or more without inhaling at all. The oxygen demands of its body have dropped so low that it simply doesn't need to breathe often. Its metabolic rate falls to just 1 or 2% of normal. It's not living in any conventional sense, it's persisting, existing in a state of suspended animation that would kill most mammals, but allows this small squirrel to survive conditions that would otherwise be impossible. But here's the strange part. Every 2 or 3 weeks, the squirrel wakes up, not fully, but enough. Its body temperature rises back to normal over the course of a few hours, a process that requires burning massive amounts of stored fat. It shivers violently as it rewarms, its muscles generating heat, bringing it back from the edge of that frozen state. It might wake just long enough to urinate, to shift position, to check its burrow. Then it settles back down, and the entire process reverses. The temperature drops again, the heart slows again. It returns to that death-like sleep for another few weeks. Scientists believe these periodic arousals are necessary because even in hibernation, waste products build up in the body and brain. The brief wake periods allow the squirrel to process and eliminate these toxins before they reach dangerous levels. It's maintenance, biological housekeeping performed in the middle of winter underground while the world above remains frozen and lifeless. This cycle continues for up to 8 months, 2/3 of the year spent in that dark burrow, curled in a ball, barely alive. The squirrel entered hibernation in September, carrying enough fat to sustain it through until April. It will lose more than half its body weight during this time, burning through its reserves gram by gram, day by day, in the slowest possible way. When spring finally arrives and the snow begins to melt, the squirrel emerges thin, hungry, desperate for food, but alive. Brown bears follow a different strategy, but one that's equally remarkable. They don't truly hibernate in the same way the Arctic ground squirrel does. Their body temperature drops only slightly, maybe 9 or 10 degrees, and they can wake relatively quickly if disturbed. Scientists call this torpor rather than true hibernation, but don't let the terminology fool you. What bears do is still extraordinary. A brown bear in torpor doesn't eat for up to 7 months. It doesn't drink water. It doesn't urinate or defecate. Not once during the entire winter. If a human tried this, they would die within weeks from the buildup of urea in the blood, from dehydration, from kidney failure. But the bear has evolved mechanisms to recycle its waste products, converting urea back into protein, maintaining its muscle mass even without food or exercise, keeping its bones strong without weight-bearing activity. The bear's heart rate drops from 40 or 50 beats per minute down to 8 or 9. Its breathing slows proportionally. It curls up in a den it excavated under a fallen tree or in a cave or beneath a pile of brush, and it settles in for the long wait. Snow piles up over the entrance, sealing it inside, insulating the den, creating a small pocket of relative warmth in the frozen wilderness. And then something even more miraculous happens. Female bears give birth during this torpor state. In the middle of winter, deep in the den, the mother bear delivers 1 to 4 tiny cubs, each weighing less than a pound. She does this while barely conscious, her body operating on automatic, instinctual programming. The cubs are born blind, hairless, helpless. They crawl through their mother's fur, following warmth and scent, until they find her nipples and begin to nurse. The mother bear nurses her cubs while remaining in torpor. Her body produces milk rich in fat and nutrients, feeding her babies even as she continues to burn through her own fat reserves. She doesn't eat anything. She's running on stored energy from the salmon she caught last summer, the berries she gorged on in autumn, the roots and grasses she consumed in early fall. All of that is now being converted into milk, keeping her cubs alive, helping them grow from tiny, helpless things into sturdy young bears who will emerge from the den in spring weighing 10 or 15 pounds. The cubs themselves are born into warmth and darkness, and the smell of their mother. They know nothing of the frozen world outside. They spend their first months of life in that den, sleeping, nursing, growing, completely dependent on a mother who is herself in a state of suspended animation. It's a nested miracle, life within torpor, consciousness emerging from semi consciousness. The cubs are awake while their mother sleeps, yet her body continues to care for them automatically, some deeper wisdom guiding the process. When spring arrives and the snow melts enough to unblock the den entrance, the mother bear finally wakes fully. She's lost 30% of her body weight, sometimes more. She's weak, stiff, desperate for food and water, but she's alive, and more importantly, her cubs are alive, ready to follow her out into the world for the first time. They emerge blinking into bright sunlight, seeing colors and movement and space after months in the dark confines of the den, and the mother teaches them everything: where to find food, how to catch fish, which berries are safe to eat. She has months to prepare them for their first winter, when they'll den together again, this time as yearlings, still dependent but growing stronger. Black bears, in some regions, skip hibernation entirely if the winter is mild enough and food remains available. They might den for just a few weeks or not at all, remaining active throughout the year. But in the far north, where winter is absolute and food disappears completely under feet of snow, hibernation isn't optional. It's the only way to survive. Researchers studying hibernating bears have discovered something that could revolutionize human medicine. Despite spending months without moving, bears don't develop muscle atrophy the way humans would. They don't get osteoporosis from lack of weight bearing activity. They don't form dangerous blood clots from lying still for so long. Somehow, their bodies have mechanisms to prevent all of these problems. If scientists could understand and replicate these mechanisms, they could help human patients who are bedridden for long periods, astronauts on extended space missions, even people in medically induced comas. The bear's den is completely dark. No light penetrates the snow and earth and wood that seal it away from the outside world. The bear breathes in that darkness, its exhalations warming the small space around it, creating a micro environment that stays just warm enough to prevent freezing. Outside, the temperature might drop to minus 40 degrees. Inside the den, it hovers just above freezing, kept tolerable by the bear's own body heat and the insulating properties of the den itself. There's something profound about this surrender to winter. The bear doesn't fight the season. It doesn't struggle against the cold or the darkness or the impossibility of finding food. It accepts what's coming and prepares for it. It eats until it can barely move, storing every possible calorie. It finds or creates the perfect shelter, and then it lets go. It trusts that its body knows what to do, that evolution has prepared it for this, that sleep is the answer when waking would mean death. And maybe that's what all of these hibernating animals understand, that we've forgotten, that there are times when the only intelligent response to impossible conditions is to stop fighting, to curl up, to lower your heartbeat to almost nothing, to let your body temperature drop, to sleep so deeply that you border on death itself, not out of desperation, but out of wisdom, not because you've given up, but because you're conserving everything you have for the moment when survival becomes possible again. But hibernation isn't the only extreme adaptation for sleep. Because while these animals are resting underground, waiting for spring, there are others who never touch the ground at all, who sleep in a place that seems to make rest impossible, where a moment of carelessness means falling to your death. They sleep in the sky itself, riding winds and currents, trusting air to hold them while consciousness fades. And somehow, against all logic, it works. There's a bird called the alpine swift that flies for 200 days without landing, not 200 hours. 200 days, nearly 7 months in continuous flight, soaring over mountains and valleys and oceans, eating insects on the wing, drinking raindrops from the air, navigating by starlight and sun, never once touching the earth. And during those 200 days, the swift still needs to sleep. The discovery of how these birds manage this seemed impossible at first. Researchers attached tiny data loggers to alpine swifts, devices that monitored their brain activity, altitude, and flight patterns. When they retrieved the data months later and analyzed it, they found something that rewrote what scientists thought they knew about avian sleep. The swifts were sleeping while flying, actually sleeping, entering slow wave sleep while gliding on air currents thousands of feet above the ground. But not for long. The sleep came in brief episodes, sometimes lasting only a few seconds, occasionally stretching to a minute or two. The bird would find a thermal, a rising column of warm air, and begin to circle within it. The circling required minimal effort, just small adjustments to wing angle, the thermal doing most of the work of keeping the bird aloft. And in that moment of reduced cognitive demand, one hemisphere of the brain would slip into sleep while the other remained awake, monitoring altitude and direction, keeping the bird in the thermal, preventing it from colliding with anything. It's the same split brain sleep the dolphins use, but happening in 3 dimensions at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour in an environment where a mistake means plummeting from the sky. The sleeping hemisphere shows all the same brainwave patterns as a bird sleeping in a nest. Deep, restorative sleep, the kind that consolidates memories and repairs neural pathways. Except it's happening while the bird is airborne, wings extended, riding invisible rivers of rising air. After a few seconds or minutes, the hemispheres would switch. The rested half would wake and take over navigation, while the previously alert half finally got its chance to rest. The switching could happen dozens of times throughout the night as the swift continued its journey through darkness. The total amount of sleep accumulated this way was surprisingly small, less than an hour per day, but apparently sufficient. The swift would arrive at its destination months later, having slept almost nothing by human standards, yet perfectly healthy and ready to breed. Great frigate birds take this aerial sleep to an even more extreme level. These massive seabirds, with wingspans reaching 7.5 feet, can stay aloft for up to 2 months during their ocean crossings. They're hunting for flying fish and squid, gliding on air currents over open water, sometimes hundreds of miles from the nearest land. And during these journeys, frigate birds sleep for an average of just 42 minutes per day, total, not per night, per entire 24-hour period. 42 minutes of sleep in a full day. If a human tried to survive on that little rest, they'd begin hallucinating within days. Their cognitive function would collapse, their immune system would fail, but the frigate bird thrives on it. Those 42 minutes are split into hundreds of tiny sleep episodes, most lasting less than 12 seconds. The bird catches these micro naps while soaring, usually during the night when visibility is low anyway and it's not actively hunting. The frigate bird has another trick. Unlike the swift, which always uses split brain sleep while airborne, the frigate bird will occasionally sleep with both hemispheres at once, but only for very brief moments, never more than 12 seconds, and only when it's high enough that 12 seconds of uncontrolled flight won't send it into the ocean. During these rare moments of complete sleep, the bird's head sometimes droops forward or tilts back, its eyes fully closed, its wings locked in position by specialized ligaments that hold them extended without muscular effort. It's a gamble every time, 12 seconds of total vulnerability, but the deeper rest that bilateral sleep provides must be worth the risk. When the frigate bird finally returns to land and roosts on a tree or cliff, it sleeps over 12 hours a day, recovering from weeks of minimal rest. Its body catches up on everything it missed while soaring over the ocean. But during those ocean flights, sleep deprivation seems to have no negative effects. The bird hunts successfully, navigates accurately, responds to threats appropriately. It's adapted to function on almost no rest for extended periods, then binge sleep when safe harbor is finally reached. Albatrosses, those legendary travelers of the southern oceans, follow similar patterns. They can fly for over 500 miles in a single day without flapping their wings once, using a technique called dynamic soaring that allows them to extract energy from wind gradients above the waves. And while they glide, covering thousands of miles during their circumnavigation of Antarctica, they sleep in flight using the same split hemisphere technique. One eye open, one eye closed, half awake, half dreaming, balanced perfectly between consciousness and surrender. These birds have redefined what sleep means. For them, rest isn't about finding a safe place and shutting down. It's about stealing moments of recovery while continuing the essential work of living. They can't afford to stop. The journey is too important. The distance is too vast. The food sources too spread out. So they sleep on the move, trusting the wind to hold them, trusting their sleeping hemisphere to recharge, while their waking one keeps them alive. There's something almost spiritual about this kind of rest, the bird releasing control, allowing itself to drift on currents it cannot see, surrendering to forces larger than itself, yet maintaining just enough awareness to survive. It's trust and vigilance balanced on a knife edge. It's the ultimate expression of efficiency, of doing multiple essential things simultaneously, because doing them sequentially would mean death. And when you think about it, these birds are teaching us something about the nature of rest itself. We imagine sleep as complete disconnection, total shutdown, 8 hours of unconsciousness where nothing matters and nothing happens. But maybe that's not the only way. Maybe rest can be layered, partial, stolen in moments throughout the day. Maybe you can recharge while still moving forward. Maybe the key isn't stopping completely, but learning to let part of yourself rest while another part keeps going. The swift continues its spiral in the thermal. The frigate bird glides over rolling ocean swells. The albatross rides the roaring forties around the bottom of the world, and they sleep, not peacefully in the way we imagine peace, not motionless in cozy beds, but peacefully nonetheless, peacefully in motion, peacefully in the sky, peacefully in the understanding that this is what they were built for, that their bodies know how to rest even when circumstances seem to forbid it. But for every creature that's learned to sleep in impossible places, there are others who've taken a completely different approach, who don't fight the elements or adapt to extreme conditions, who instead retreat from the world entirely, digging deep into the earth, creating havens of warmth and safety far below the surface, who trust the ground itself to protect them while they sleep, surrounding themselves with family, with community, with the simple comfort of bodies pressed together in the dark. Beneath your feet right now, there's an entire civilization you'll never see. Miles of tunnels carved through earth and stone, chambers stocked with food, nurseries lined with soft grass, escape routes and ventilation shafts, and meeting rooms. A whole architecture of survival built by creatures who understood something fundamental about rest, that the safest sleep happens when the world can't reach you. Meerkats live in the Kalahari Desert, one of the harshest environments on the planet. During the day, temperatures can soar past 120 degrees Fahrenheit. At night, they can plummet to near freezing. Predators circle constantly: eagles from above, jackals from ground level, snakes that slip silently through the sand. For a small mammal weighing barely 2 pounds, every moment above ground is dangerous. So meerkats spend their nights underground in burrow systems that can stretch over 5,000 square feet and have up to 15 entrance holes. These aren't simple tunnels, they're multi generational construction projects, expanded and improved over decades by successive families. Some burrow systems in the Kalahari are believed to be over a century old, passed down like inherited estates, each generation adding new chambers and passages. When night falls and the desert cools, the meerkat clan retreats below. They sleep in piles, sometimes 20 individuals pressed together in a single chamber. Body heat radiates from the center of the group outward. The ones on the outside form a living blanket for those in the middle. Baby meerkats, called pups, sleep in the warmest spot, surrounded by parents, siblings, aunts, uncles. The entire clan becomes one organism, breathing together, hearts beating in loose synchronization, warmth flowing between bodies. But even underground, even surrounded by family, the meerkats don't completely let their guard down. Throughout the night, individuals take turns acting as sentries. They wake, slip out of the sleeping pile, and position themselves near the burrow entrance. They listen. They watch through the darkness for any sign of danger: a snake sliding down a tunnel, a predator digging at an entrance. After an hour or two, they return to the sleeping chamber, and another meerkat takes over the watch. This rotation continues all night, every night. The cost of vigilance is high. Those sentry meerkats lose sleep, but the benefit to the group is survival. And here's what's remarkable about meerkat social structure: the sentries aren't always the same individuals. Leadership rotates, responsibility is shared. Young meerkats learn by watching older ones, and eventually they take their turns standing watch while others rest. It's a democracy of sleep, where everyone contributes to the safety that allows everyone to rest. Prairie dogs in North America have developed an even more elaborate underground world. A single prairie dog town can span hundreds of acres and house thousands of individuals. The tunnels descend 6 to 10 feet below the surface, following a design that's remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years because it works perfectly. Each burrow system has a specific architecture. The entrance mounds are built up around some openings and left flat around others. This creates a pressure differential. When wind blows across the town, it creates higher pressure at the tall mounds and lower pressure at the flat entrances. This pressure difference pulls air through the tunnels, ventilating them, bringing fresh oxygen down to the sleeping chambers and pushing stale air out. The prairie dogs engineered natural air conditioning without understanding the physics involved. They simply built what felt right, what kept the air moving, and natural selection refined the design over millennia. The sleeping chambers are lined with dried grass that the prairie dogs gather from the surface. They bite off grass stems, carry them down into the burrows, and arrange them into soft beds. These grass beds are replaced regularly, kept clean and dry, providing insulation against the cold earth. In winter, when the ground freezes solid just inches below the surface, these grass-lined chambers remain surprisingly warm, heated by the body temperature of sleeping prairie dogs and insulated by the earth itself. Prairie dogs are incredibly social sleepers. Family groups called coteries share sleeping chambers, usually consisting of one adult male, 1 to 4 adult females, and their offspring. They groom each other before sleeping, a behavior that scientists believe strengthens social bonds and reduces stress. The grooming sessions can last for over an hour, each prairie dog taking turns cleaning another's fur, checking for parasites, reinforcing the relationships that hold the coterie together. When they finally settle in for the night, they arrange themselves carefully, adults on the outside, youngest pups in the center. Each animal has a preferred sleeping position. Some curl into tight balls, others stretch out on their sides, a few sleep on their backs, paws in the air, completely relaxed. The chamber fills with the soft sounds of breathing, occasional squeaks as individuals shift position, the rustling of grass bedding. And then there are wombats, those stocky Australian marsupials who've taken underground living to an extreme. A single wombat can excavate over 650 feet of tunnels, creating a labyrinth that includes multiple chambers, dead ends to confuse predators, and emergency exits that pop up far from the main entrance. The wombat digs with its powerful front legs and teeth, moving astonishing amounts of soil, creating spaces that maintain remarkably stable conditions year-round. Inside a wombat burrow, the temperature stays between 62 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of outside conditions. When the Australian summer turns the surface into a scorching oven, the burrow remains cool. When winter brings freezing nights, the burrow stays temperate. Humidity levels remain constant too, preventing the respiratory problems that plague many animals in Australia's variable climate. Wombats are surprisingly tolerant neighbors. Their burrows are often shared with other species. Echidnas shelter in wombat tunnels during bushfires. Small wallabies use them as resting spots during the day. Even some birds nest in the entrance chambers. The wombat doesn't seem to mind these uninvited guests as long as they stay out of the main sleeping chamber. It's as if the wombat understands that its engineering skills have created something valuable, a safe haven that benefits many creatures, and there's enough space for everyone. The wombat sleeps during the day, emerging at night to graze on grasses and roots. Its sleeping position is peculiar. It often sleeps on its side, with all four legs sticking straight out, like a stuffed animal knocked over onto its side. Despite appearances, this position is apparently comfortable for the wombat's unique skeletal structure. It can remain in this position for up to 16 hours, waking only occasionally to shift slightly before settling back into sleep. Rabbits create similar underground communities called warrens, though their social structures are more complex and sometimes more violent than prairie dogs or meerkats. A warren can house hundreds of rabbits in interconnected tunnel systems that may include 30 or more entrances. The dominant buck controls the best sleeping chambers, usually the deepest and most protected. Subordinate rabbits sleep closer to entrances in chambers that are less secure but offer faster escape routes if predators break in. Female rabbits create special nesting chambers called stops for giving birth. These are separate from the main warren, often dug as dead end tunnels with only one entrance that the mother can easily defend. She lines the stop with fur plucked from her own belly, creating a soft, warm nest for her babies. Rabbit kits are born blind, deaf, and nearly hairless. They're completely dependent on that fur lined chamber and their mother's warmth for survival. The mother rabbit doesn't stay with her kits constantly. She visits them once, sometimes twice per day to nurse, then seals the entrance to the stop with soil to hide it from predators. The rest of the time, the kits sleep in that sealed chamber, their body temperatures regulated by the insulating fur and the stable underground temperature. It seems cruel leaving babies alone in the dark for 23 hours a day, but it's actually a brilliant strategy. The mother's presence would draw predators to the stop. Her absence keeps the kits safe. What all these burrowing animals share is an understanding that real security requires depth, not just physical depth, digging down into the earth, but also temporal depth. These burrow systems take time to build. Some take years. They represent an investment in the future, a commitment to place. The animals aren't nomadic. They've chosen this spot, this soil, and they've created something permanent. And in doing so, they've created something else too: peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you're surrounded by walls you built yourself, when you're protected by earth and darkness, when you're sleeping next to others who share your vulnerabilities and your determination to survive. It's a peace that humans once knew, when we too lived in caves and shelters dug into hillsides, when we understood that safety meant going down, getting covered, being held by the ground itself. The meerkat shifts in its sleep, pressed against its siblings. The prairie dog's whiskers twitch as it dreams of grass and sunshine. The wombat breathes slowly in its chamber, its solid body completely relaxed, and above them, the surface world continues its dangerous rhythms. Predators hunt, weather rages. But down here, in the engineered darkness, life rests safely. Though not all creatures seek safety in the ground, some have found it in a completely different direction. Not down, but up. Not in darkness, but in the canopy, where light filters through leaves, where sleep requires construction every single night, where rest is earned through ritual, where beds are woven from branches, and intelligence is measured by the quality of your nest. There's a ritual that happens every evening in the rainforests of Borneo and Sumatra, a ceremony so consistent that you could set your watch by it. As the sun begins its descent and the harsh equatorial light softens into something gentler, the orangutans stop whatever they're doing and begin to build. An adult orangutan can construct a sleeping nest in less than 10 minutes and chooses a location carefully, usually 50 to 75 feet above the ground, high enough to be safe from ground predators, but not so high that the thin branches can't support its weight. The orangutan tests multiple spots, bouncing slightly on branches, feeling for the right combination of strength and flexibility. It's evaluating engineering properties that it understands intuitively but could never explain. Once the location is chosen, the orangutan begins to break branches, not randomly, systematically. It pulls branches inward toward a central point, bending but not breaking them completely, weaving them together into a loose platform. Larger branches form the foundation. Smaller branches and leafy twigs fill in the gaps. The orangutan works with its hands and feet simultaneously, holding some branches in place while bending others, creating a structure that's part basket, part mattress, entirely functional. The finished nest is roughly circular, about 3 to 5 feet in diameter. Some orangutans add a roof by pulling leafy branches over the top, creating shelter from rain. Others add soft leaves and moss as a final layer, improving comfort. Each nest is unique, reflecting the individual builder's preferences and the available materials. Some are tightly woven, barely sagging under the orangutan's weight. Others are looser, more like hammocks that sway gently with every breath. And here's what makes this even more remarkable. Orangutans never reuse nests, ever. Each evening requires a new construction. After spending the night in a carefully built nest, the orangutan simply abandons it at dawn and moves on. By the time it's ready to sleep again, 12 or 14 hours later, it's miles away in a different part of the forest, and it builds again from scratch. Scientists studying this behavior initially thought it was wasteful. Why not return to the same nest? Why not build one really good permanent structure and sleep there every night? But the more they studied, the more sense it made. Old nests accumulate parasites, mites, lice, fungal spores. A fresh nest every night means minimal parasite exposure. It also means predators can't learn the orangutan's sleeping location. There's no predictable place to ambush it. The orangutan's bedroom moves every single night, making it nearly impossible to hunt. Baby orangutans sleep with their mothers in the nest until they're 7 or 8 years old. The mother builds a nest large and strong enough for both of them, the infant clinging to her chest or pressed against her side. As the baby grows older, it begins to practice nest building during the day, making clumsy attempts in low branches while the mother watches. These practice nests are terrible at first, falling apart immediately, but the young orangutan learns through repetition. By the time it's ready to sleep alone, it's had years of practice and can build a competent nest. Mountain gorillas in the forests of Rwanda and Uganda follow a similar routine, though their nests are less elaborate. Adult gorillas are too heavy for high branches, so they build their nests on the ground or in low trees. Every adult gorilla builds its own nest each evening, except for infants who sleep with their mothers. The dominant silverback male usually builds his nest in a central location with good visibility where he can monitor the group even while resting. A gorilla nest takes about 5 minutes to construct. The gorilla bends plants and branches inward, breaking some, leaving others attached but bent, creating a circular platform about 3 to 4 feet across. Unlike orangutan nests, gorilla nests are rough and simple. They're not designed for comfort so much as slight elevation and a clear boundary. This is my sleeping space. This is where I'll be for the next 12 hours. The psychological importance of that boundary might be more significant than its physical function. Gorilla families sleep close together, often with just a few feet between nests. The proximity serves multiple purposes. It maintains social bonds. It provides warmth on cold mountain nights. It allows the group to respond quickly if a predator approaches, but it also requires negotiation. Each gorilla wants a good sleeping spot, safe and comfortable, and with 12 or 15 individuals all trying to build nests in the same area, there's inevitably some conflict. Younger gorillas sometimes build too close to the silverback and get chased away. Lower ranking individuals end up with less desirable spots, maybe on a slope or near thorny plants. But once the nests are built and everyone settles in, peace descends. The gorillas lie on their sides or backs, arms folded across their massive chests, eyes closing as darkness fills the forest. Their breathing deepens. The sounds of the day, the grunts and hoots and chest beating, give way to softer noises, snoring, the rustle of someone shifting position, a baby whimpering briefly before settling back against its mother. Chimpanzees build nests too, usually high in trees, always fresh each evening. But chimpanzees add an interesting detail that orangutans and gorillas don't. They often build their nests near fruit trees that will ripen soon. The chimpanzee sleeps beside its future breakfast, waking at dawn to food already within reach. It's planning ahead, thinking about tomorrow's needs while addressing today's need for rest. That kind of forward thinking, that temporal awareness, is rare in the animal kingdom. Research has shown that chimpanzee nests are remarkably clean compared to human beds. Scientists collected samples from both and analyzed the microscopic life present. Human beds, despite regular washing, are filled with body bacteria shed from our skin. Chimpanzee nests contain far fewer body bacteria and almost no fecal bacteria. The fresh construction every night prevents accumulation. The elevated position keeps ground dwelling parasites away. In terms of hygiene, a chimpanzee sleeps cleaner than most humans. Spider monkeys in Central and South America take a different approach to tree sleeping. They don't build nests at all. Instead, they sleep in groups on large branches, their prehensile tails wrapped around the branch or around each other. The tail acts as a fifth limb, strong enough to support the monkey's full weight, sensitive enough to feel the branch's texture and stability. And sleeping spider monkey might dangle from its tail, body hanging below the branch, completely relaxed. Groups of spider monkeys often sleep intertwined, tails and limbs overlapping, creating a mass of fur and flesh that's almost impossible to separate into individual animals. This sleeping arrangement serves obvious thermoregulation purposes, but it's also deeply social. Touch maintains bonds. Physical connection reinforces emotional connection. A spider monkey that sleeps alone is usually either sick or ostracized from the group. Healthy, socially integrated monkeys sleep in contact with others. Lemurs in Madagascar use tree hollows when they can find them, natural cavities in trunks where they curl up in groups. Ring-tailed lemurs, those iconic primates with their striped tails, have a peculiar morning ritual that's related to their sleep. At dawn, after waking from their tree hollow, they emerge into open areas and sit facing the rising sun. They stretch out their arms and legs, exposing as much surface area as possible, and they sunbathe. The sun warms their bodies, which cooled during the night, raising their core temperature and preparing them for activity. This sun-worshipping behavior looks religious, and maybe in a sense it is. It's a daily acknowledgement of the sun's power, a physical demonstration of dependence on heat and light. The lemurs sit quietly, eyes half closed, soaking in warmth, breathing slowly. It's meditation. It's gratitude. It's the transition from sleep to waking made visible and beautiful. What strikes you about all these nest building primates is the intentionality. These aren't animals that simply collapse wherever they happen to be when tiredness overtakes them. They plan, they choose locations, they gather materials, they construct, they create a space that exists solely for rest, and they do this knowing the space is temporary. Tomorrow they'll build again, the next day, again, every evening for their entire lives. There's something almost spiritual about that commitment, about honoring sleep enough to build a sanctuary for it every single day, about treating rest as important enough to deserve craftsmanship. The orangutan weaving branches, the gorilla bending plants, they're engaging in a ritual that's older than agriculture, older than tools, older than fire. They're making a bed, and in making a bed, they're acknowledging their vulnerability, their need for comfort, their requirement for those hours of unconsciousness that leave them defenseless. And maybe that's what we've lost in our modern world of mattresses that last a decade and bedrooms that never change. We've forgotten that sleep is sacred enough to prepare for, that rest deserves ritual, that the transition from waking to sleeping isn't something to rush through, but something to honor with attention and care. The orangutan building its nest at sunset understands this. The gorilla bending branches into a circle understands this. They know that how you prepare for sleep affects the quality of sleep itself. But while these large primates carefully construct their nighttime sanctuaries, there's an entire world of smaller creatures whose sleep is just as carefully orchestrated, despite happening on a completely different scale. Creatures so tiny that a single leaf becomes a bed, a flower petal becomes a blanket, and sleep must be stolen in seconds rather than hours because their metabolisms burn so hot that rest is a luxury they can barely afford. If you've ever watched a honeybee closely, really closely, you might have noticed something strange. Sometimes a bee simply stops. It becomes absolutely still, its antenna drooping forward, its legs relaxing their grip slightly. It looks like it's paused, like someone pressed pause on a video. But what you're actually witnessing is sleep. Bees sleep. Not the way mammals sleep. Not for long, uninterrupted stretches, but they definitely sleep. And the more scientists study them, the more complex and fascinating their sleep patterns become. Young worker bees, those fresh from pupation still working inside the hive, sleep in the same hexagonal cells where they were born. They back into the cell until only their heads poke out, and they rest there, surrounded by the same wax walls that held them during metamorphosis. It's the bee equivalent of sleeping in your childhood bedroom. The cell is the right temperature, the right shape, the right scent. It feels like home because it literally is home. Boulder worker bees, those who've graduated to foraging duty and spend their days flying between flowers and hive, sleep near the edges of the hive or even outside it. They're the guards, the first line of defense, and even in sleep they maintain their position. They rest in short bursts, 15 to 30 minutes at a time, accumulating 5 to 8 hours of total sleep across a 24-hour period, but never all at once. And here's what researchers discovered that fundamentally changed our understanding of insect cognition. Bees experience something similar to REM sleep. Their antennae vibrate slightly during certain sleep phases. Their bodies twitch, brain activity measured through tiny electrodes, shows patterns that closely resemble the rapid eye movement phase that mammals go through during dreaming. Do bees dream? Do they replay their foraging routes through neural landscapes of flowers and sunlight? We don't know, but they might. Sleep deprived bees perform poorly at learning tasks. They struggle to remember flower locations. Their waggle dances, those figure eight movements that communicate food sources to other bees, become less precise. They become clumsy, bumping into things, falling off surfaces. In every measurable way, a tired bee is a less effective bee. Sleep, even for an insect with a brain smaller than a pinhead, is essential for cognitive function. Butterflies and moths have their own sleep strategies, though calling it sleep might be generous. They roost, entering states of reduced activity and awareness, but remaining capable of flight if disturbed. Monarch butterflies, during their incredible migration from Canada to Mexico, roost in massive clusters on trees. Thousands of butterflies packed together, wings folded, hanging from branches like leaves made of stained glass. These roosting clusters serve multiple purposes. They conserve heat through the cold nights. They provide safety in numbers, making it harder for predators to pick off individuals. And they allow the butterflies to rest without expending energy. The migration requires them to fly over 2,000 miles, and every calorie matters. They can't afford to burn energy staying warm individually when clustering achieves the same result more efficiently. When morning comes and the sun warms the roosting tree, the butterflies begin to stir. Wings open slowly, catching the light, warming the flight muscles. The butterflies shiver, vibrating their wings to generate heat, raising their body temperature to the point where flight becomes possible. Then, one by one, they launch from the branches, orange and black wings filling the air, continuing their journey south. Ladybugs hibernate in groups that can number in the thousands. They find sheltered spots under bark, in rock crevices, in the corners of houses, and they cluster together for the winter. Their bodies enter diapause, a state of suspended development where metabolic activity drops to near zero. They're not quite sleeping and not quite alive in the active sense. They're waiting, existing in slow motion until spring arrives and warmth returns. Some ladybug species produce their own antifreeze, similar to the Arctic ground squirrel. This prevents ice crystals from forming inside their cells during winter. Without this adaptation, the first hard freeze would kill them. With it, they can survive temperatures that would shatter them at a cellular level if they weren't chemically protected. Dragonflies roost on vegetation at night, becoming so still they're easy to miss. During the day, they're among the most skilled flyers in the insect world, capable of hovering, flying backward, catching prey mid-air with precision that rivals fighter jets. But at night, they simply perch on a reed or branch and stop. They don't hide. They don't seek shelter. They just become motionless, trusting their stillness to keep them safe. That trust seems misplaced. A motionless dragonfly on a reed should be easy prey for any bird or spider. But remember that most predators hunt using motion detection. A moving insect triggers the hunt response. A perfectly still insect becomes part of the background, invisible, despite being in plain sight. The dragonfly's sleep strategy is to become indistinguishable from a twig, from a leaf, from anything non living, and it works remarkably well. Ants are among the most industrious creatures on Earth, but even ants sleep. Fire ant workers take roughly 250 naps per day, each lasting just over a minute. That's over 4 hours of total sleep, but scattered across 250 separate episodes. They're power napping on an extreme scale, stealing rest in fragments between their countless tasks. Queen ants sleep very differently. They take longer naps, around 6 minutes each, and accumulate over 9 hours of sleep per day. The queen can afford this luxury because she's protected by workers, fed by workers, cleaned by workers. Her only job is reproduction, and apparently that job requires significantly more rest than the frenetic labor of maintaining the colony. Scientists studying ant sleep have observed something touching. When ants sleep, their legs fold beneath them and their antennae go still. Other ants walking past sometimes touch the sleeping ant with their antennae, a brief check to ensure it's still alive and not dead or sick. The sleeping ant doesn't respond, but the checking ant seems satisfied and moves on. It's a wellness check, a moment of social care embedded in the colony's routine. Fruit flies, those tiny insects that appear wherever there's overripe produce, have taught researchers enormous amounts about sleep genetics. Despite having a brain with only about 100,000 neurons compared to a human's 86 billion, fruit flies show clear sleep like states. They become immobile for consolidated periods. They're harder to arouse during these periods, and they show sleep rebound if deprived of rest. They need sleep, and genetic mutations that disrupt their sleep are often lethal. The study of fruit fly sleep has identified dozens of genes involved in regulating rest and wakefulness. Many of these genes have equivalents in humans. Discoveries made watching fruit flies have translated directly into understanding human sleep disorders. It's humbling to realize that the genetic machinery controlling your sleep evolved hundreds of millions of years ago and is shared with an insect that lives for 30 days. What becomes clear when you study insect sleep is that rest is not a luxury evolution added recently. It's fundamental. It exists in creatures with brains so simple they barely qualify as brains by our standards. It exists in animals that live for weeks, not decades. It persists even when it seems dangerous, even when it leaves the creature vulnerable. The bee in its hexagonal cell, antenna drooping in sleep, is practicing an art older than flowers themselves. The butterfly roosting in a cluster of thousands, conserving heat through a cold night, is engaging in a survival strategy refined over millions of generations. The dragonfly, motionless on its reed, trusting stillness to keep it safe, is making a bet that evolution has proven correct countless times. These tiny creatures, so different from us in almost every way, still close their eyes, or the insect equivalent. They still stop moving. They still need those hours or minutes of reduced consciousness to function properly when awake. And maybe that's the real revelation, that sleep isn't about being big or smart or complex. It's about being alive. And life, no matter how small, no matter how brief, requires rest. But insects aren't the only creatures with unusual sleep adaptations. There are animals whose rest patterns defy every assumption, creatures who've evolved strategies so strange that when scientists first documented them, they weren't believed. Animals who barely sleep at all despite being massive. Animals who sleep thousands of times per day for just seconds each time. Animals whose sleep is so unlike our own that it challenges the very definition of rest itself. In the savannas of Africa, as the sun sets and shadows stretch across the grasslands, something remarkable happens. Or rather, something remarkable doesn't happen. The giraffes, those towering giants with necks that reach 18 feet into the acacia canopy, barely sleep at all. A giraffe sleeps for roughly 30 minutes to 2 hours in a full 24-hour period. That's it. The rest of the time, it remains awake, alert, feeding on leaves, moving slowly across its territory, always watching for predators. And when it does finally surrender to sleep, it does so in the most vulnerable position imaginable. Most of the time, giraffes sleep standing up, their legs lock in place using a specialized mechanism in their joints, allowing them to doze without collapsing. This standing sleep is light, more like a drowsy state than true rest. The giraffe's eyes might close halfway, its head might lower slightly, but it remains ready to flee at any disturbance. A snapping twig, a distant roar, the shift of wind carrying a predator's scent. Any of these triggers instant wakefulness and flight. But true sleep, deep sleep, requires the giraffe to lie down. And lying down for a giraffe is a production. First, it folds its front legs beneath itself, lowering the front half of its body to the ground. Then it folds its rear legs, bringing its hindquarters down. Finally, in the most striking posture, it curves that impossibly long neck back and rests its head on its own hindquarters. The neck loops around like a question mark, the head pillowed on the body, creating a shape that looks almost mythological in its strangeness. This position is dangerous. A lying giraffe cannot stand quickly. It takes precious seconds to unfold those long legs, to raise that massive body, to get the weight distributed properly for running. Seconds that a lion doesn't need to cover the distance between hunting and killing. So giraffes only lie down when they feel relatively safe, and even then only for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. They take maybe 3 or 4 of these deep sleep sessions per night, accumulating perhaps 30 minutes of actual restorative rest. There's they survive on so little sleep. Scientists aren't entirely sure. Large animals generally need less sleep than small ones. Metabolic rate matters. Brain size relative to body size matters. But even accounting for these factors, giraffes sleep far less than they theoretically should. They seem to have optimized their biology for maximum wakefulness, accepting whatever cognitive and physical costs come with chronic sleep restriction, because the alternative, being vulnerable for longer periods, carries a higher cost. Elephants follow a similar pattern. In the wild, elephants sleep only 2 to 4 hours per night. They spend most of this time standing, swaying gently, trunks hanging loose, eyes half closed. Like giraffes, they can doze upright thanks to their leg structure. But unlike giraffes, elephants are large enough that most predators won't attack them. An adult elephant has little to fear from lions or hyenas. So why the minimal sleep? The answer seems to be food. Elephants need to consume roughly 300 pounds of vegetation per day. That's not a typo. 300 pounds. They spend 16 to 18 hours per day eating, moving slowly through their habitat, stripping leaves from trees, pulling up grass, demolishing entire bushes. There simply aren't enough hours in the day for extended sleep. They've chosen calories over rest, prioritizing the fuel that keeps their enormous bodies functioning. When elephants do lie down for deep sleep, they sleep on their sides, their massive bodies stretched out on the ground, trunks coiled near their heads. This happens rarely, maybe once every few days, and usually only for 30 minutes or so. Matriarch elephants, the oldest females who lead their herds, sleep even less than other adults. The responsibility of leadership apparently requires greater vigilance. In captivity, elephants sleep significantly more, sometimes up to 6 hours per night. The reliable food supply, the absence of predators, the safety of enclosures, all of these factors allow them to relax more fully. It's one of the few ways captivity might actually reduce stress for these intelligent social animals, though, of course, the trade off is everything else: freedom, natural behavior, the ability to walk dozens of miles per day as they would in the wild. Horses and cows also sleep standing, using what's called a stay apparatus, a system of ligaments and tendons that lock their leg joints without requiring muscular effort. They can remain upright for hours while dozing, conserving energy, staying ready to flee. But here's the catch: they can't achieve REM sleep while standing. The muscle paralysis that accompanies REM sleep would cause them to collapse. So they must lie down for that deepest phase of rest, the phase where dreaming happens, where memories are consolidated, where the brain performs its most essential maintenance. Horses lie down for REM sleep only about 2 or 3 hours per week, spread across multiple short sessions. A horse might lie down for 15 minutes, go through a brief REM cycle, then stand back up and return to standing sleep. This pattern is risky. Lying down makes them vulnerable, but it's also necessary. Horses that are prevented from lying down, either through injury or anxiety or environmental factors, develop serious health problems. They become irritable, clumsy, unable to learn new tasks. Their brains need those brief periods of REM, and if they can't get them, everything begins to break down. Sea lions sleep on beaches in massive colonies, sometimes hundreds of individuals packed together on narrow strips of sand. They sleep on their sides or on their backs, flippers draped across their bodies, looking remarkably human in their relaxation. The crowding serves multiple purposes. It maintains body temperature through shared warmth. It provides safety through numbers, and it facilitates social bonding through physical contact. But sea lions also face a unique challenge. They live in two worlds, land and water, and they must be competent sleepers in both. In the water, they use unihemispheric sleep like dolphins, keeping half their brain awake to manage breathing and navigation. On land, they can finally relax into bilateral sleep, both hemispheres resting simultaneously. The beach becomes a place of deeper rest than anything they can achieve while floating. Young sea lion pups sleep even more than adults, sometimes 16 hours per day. They need the extra rest for growth and development. Mother sea lions often sleep with multiple pups piled on top of them, a writhing mass of flippers and whiskers. The pups squirm in their sleep, crying out occasionally, learning through dreams how to navigate the dual worlds they've been born into. And then there are penguins, whose sleep strategy is perhaps the strangest documented in any animal. Tenstrap penguins in Antarctica face a constant dilemma. They must incubate their eggs or guard their chicks continuously. Predatory birds like squaws watch constantly for any unguarded moment. But the penguins also need to sleep. How do you rest when stopping watch means losing your offspring? The answer was discovered only recently through brain monitoring of wild penguins. Chinstrap penguins take over 10,000 naps per day. Not an exaggeration. Over 10,000 separate sleep episodes, each lasting an average of 4 seconds. That's barely enough time to close your eyes. Certainly not enough for any kind of deep rest by conventional understanding. Yet somehow, these micro naps add up to about 11 hours of total sleep per day. The penguin's brain has adapted to consolidate the restorative functions of sleep into incredibly brief windows. It cycles in and out of sleep states thousands of times daily, stealing rest in the gaps between vigilance. One moment it's awake, watching for predators, watching over its egg. 4 seconds later, it's asleep. 4 seconds after that, it's awake again. This pattern continues all day, all night, throughout the entire breeding season. Scientists monitoring this behavior found it almost unbelievable at first. They checked their equipment multiple times, certain there must be an error, but the data was clear. The penguins were sleeping thousands of times per day for just seconds each time, and they appeared perfectly healthy, successfully raising chicks, maintaining normal behavior and cognition. This discovery has forced researchers to reconsider what sleep actually is. If an animal can fragment sleep into 4 second chunks and still gain the benefits, what does that tell us about the minimum requirements for rest? What essential processes can the brain accomplish in 4 seconds of unconsciousness? The penguins are teaching us that sleep might be far more flexible, far more adaptable than we ever imagined. In Australia, the echidna, a bizarre egg-laying mammal covered in spines, shows almost no REM sleep at all. Scientists studying echidna brain activity found very little of the rapid eye movement and associated brain patterns that characterize dreaming in other mammals. The echidna sleeps, definitely, but it seems to skip or minimize the phase that we consider most essential for psychological restoration. How is this possible? Does the echidna not dream? Does it not need the memory consolidation and emotional processing that REM sleep provides? Or has it evolved alternative mechanisms for achieving the same results through different neural pathways? These questions remain largely unanswered. The echidna keeps its secrets, shuffling through Australian forests, sleeping in ways we don't fully understand. What all these strange sleepers share is a fundamental truth. They've each found the minimum viable amount of rest for their particular ecological niche. The giraffe sleeps just enough to avoid cognitive collapse while minimizing predation risk. The elephant sleeps just enough to function while maximizing feeding time. The penguin fragments its sleep into absurdly brief episodes because that's the only way to simultaneously rest and protect offspring. The echidna apparently needs very little REM sleep because its brain accomplishes those tasks through other means. There's no universal template for sleep, no single correct way to rest. Evolution has produced hundreds of solutions to the same basic problem, each one perfectly calibrated to the animal's needs, environment, and dangers. The diversity of sleep strategies across the animal kingdom reveals that rest is not a luxury that evolution adds when convenient. It's a necessity that evolution preserves even under the most extreme constraints. The giraffe folding its neck back onto its hindquarters, sleeping for 5 minutes before jolting awake. The elephant swaying on locked legs, trunk hanging, barely conscious. The penguin in Antarctica, eyes closing for 4 seconds before snapping open again. They're all doing the same essential thing, allowing their brains to briefly disengage from the world, to process information, to restore chemical balances, to prepare for the next period of wakefulness. They're sleeping, and in sleeping, they're proving that life requires rest, no matter how inconvenient, no matter how dangerous, no matter how little time there is for it. But what does all of this mean for us? Lying here listening, our own bodies growing heavy, our own minds starting to drift. What have we learned from this journey through the sleeping habits of creatures, great and small? What wisdom have the animals shared about rest, about trust, about the universal need to close our eyes and surrender to the night? We started this journey in the rainforest canopy with the sloth hanging motionless from its branch, sleeping 20 hours a day without apology. We've traveled through oceans where dolphins sleep with half their brain, through frozen tundras where ground squirrels supercool their bodies to survive winter, through skies where birds sleep while flying. We've gone underground with meerkats and prairie dogs, up into trees with orangutans building fresh nests every evening, down to the microscopic scale where bees dream in hexagonal cells. And now, as we bring this journey to a close, you might notice something. Your breathing has probably slowed. Your muscles have released tensions you didn't know you were holding. Your mind has wandered through forests and oceans and skies, connecting with creatures you'll never meet, but whose existence somehow touches yours. This connection itself is restful. This journey through other lives, other strategies for survival, other ways of being has been preparation for your own rest. Because here's what all of these animals have taught us: sleep is not one thing, it's 1,000 things. It's the sloth's surrender to slowness, the dolphin's split consciousness, the bear's winter long fast, the swift's aerial dreams. It's the meerkat sleeping in a pile with its family, the orangutan weaving branches into a temporary sanctuary, the bee backing into its cell, the giraffe folding its impossible neck. Every species has found its own answer to the same essential question: how do I rest in a dangerous world? And each answer is perfect for that particular animal, in that particular environment facing those particular challenges. The dolphin can't sleep like a sloth. The sloth can't sleep like a frigate bird. The frigate bird can't sleep like an Arctic ground squirrel. There is no universal right way. There's only what works, what evolution has refined over millions of years, what allows that specific creature to wake up again and continue living. This diversity should comfort us, because it means that your sleep, whatever form it takes, doesn't have to look like anyone else's. Some of us are sloths, needing long hours of deep rest. Some of us are frigate birds, able to function on less, stealing rest in fragments. Some of us are bears, sleeping more in winter, less in summer. Some of us are dolphins, never fully shutting down, always keeping part of ourselves alert. And all of these patterns are valid because they're all found in nature. The animals also teach us about preparation. The orangutan doesn't just collapse at sunset. It builds, it creates a space worthy of rest, even knowing that space is temporary. The prairie dog lines its chamber with soft grass. The wombat excavates tunnels that maintain perfect temperature. They honor sleep by preparing for it, by treating it as important enough to deserve effort and attention. When was the last time you prepared for sleep with that kind of intention? When did you last think of your bedroom as a nest you're building, a den you're lining, a burrow you're engineering for optimal rest? The animals know something we've forgotten: that the quality of sleep begins long before you close your eyes. It begins with the decision to take rest seriously, to create conditions that support it, to ritualize the transition from waking to sleeping. The animals also teach us about trust. The otter holding hands with its neighbor, trusting it won't drift away alone. The meerkat sleeping in a pile, trusting the sentries to stay alert. The bird sleeping while flying, trusting the wind to hold it. Every act of sleep is an act of faith, faith that you'll wake again, faith that the world will still be there, faith that your vulnerability won't be exploited while you're defenseless. In our modern world, we've lost some of that trust. We lie awake worrying about tomorrow. We check our phones in the middle of the night. We resist sleep, fighting it, as if staying awake longer will somehow solve our problems or give us more control. But the animals know better. They know that control is an illusion, that real safety comes from accepting vulnerability, that rest itself is the ultimate act of courage. The bear entering its den for 7 months isn't giving up. It's trusting, trusting that spring will come, trusting that its body knows what to do, trusting that sleep, even sleep that looks like death, is actually the path to survival. The dolphin closing one eye isn't weak, it's wise, wise enough to rest what can be rested while keeping alert what must stay alert, wise enough to know that partial rest is better than no rest at all. And perhaps most importantly, the animals teach us that rest is not separate from life. It's not time stolen from living. It's part of living, maybe the most essential part. The sloth isn't lazy, it's energy efficient. The bear isn't wasting winter, it's surviving winter. The bee isn't shirking duties when it sleeps in its cell, it's maintaining the cognitive function that makes it an effective worker when awake. Rest enables everything else. Without it, the predator becomes prey. The flyer falls from the sky. The builder can't build. The dreamer can't dream. You've been lying here for a while now, listening to these stories, and maybe you've noticed that the animals have started to blur together in your mind. The sloth hanging in the canopy becomes the bat in the cave, becomes the butterfly on the branch. The dolphin in the ocean becomes the otter on the surface, becomes the penguin on the ice. They're all sleeping, they're all resting, they're all resting, they're all practicing that universal surrender that every living thing must practice to continue living. And you're one of them, not separate from nature, but part of it. Your need for sleep connects you to the smallest bee and the largest whale. Your nightly surrender to unconsciousness is the same surrender made by creatures in every habitat, every climate, every corner of this planet. You're not alone in this. You're part of an ancient rhythm that predates humanity, that will continue long after humanity, that links all of life in a common necessity. So as you lie there, feeling the weight of your body against the mattress, feeling your thoughts becoming less linear, more dreamlike, remember the sloth in its tree. Remember the dolphin in the waves. Remember the bear in its den, and the swift in the sky, and the meerkat in its burrow. Remember that they're all resting too, in their own ways, following their own rhythms, trusting their own bodies to know what to do. Your body knows what to do. It's been doing this every night of your life. It knows how to slow your heart rate. It knows how to relax your muscles. It knows how to shift your brain waves from alert beta rhythms to drowsy alpha waves to deep delta sleep. It knows how to cycle through stages of rest, each one serving a different purpose, each one essential. You don't have to control this process, you just have to allow it. The animals aren't thinking about sleep, they're just sleeping. They're not analyzing whether they're doing it right or wondering if they should be doing something else. They're simply responding to their body's signals, honoring their need for rest, trusting the process that evolution has perfected over billions of years. You can do the same. You can let go of the need to manage or optimize or perfect. You can just sleep. Somewhere right now, a sloth is hanging in the darkness, its heart beating 40 times per minute, its breath slow and shallow, completely at peace. Somewhere a dolphin is floating just below the surface, one eye closed, half its brain dreaming of fish and sun and the endless blue. Somewhere a bear is curled in its den, its body barely alive, its cubs nursing at its side, winter passing by outside like a long, slow exhale. Somewhere, and Swift is gliding through the night sky, sleeping in 4-second bursts, trusting the thermals to hold it aloft. Somewhere, an orangutan is sleeping in a nest it wove at sunset, high in the canopy where the stars filter through leaves. Somewhere, a bee is backed into its hexagonal cell, antennae drooping, surrounded by thousands of sisters also sleeping, also dreaming their small bee dreams. And somewhere, you're here listening to this, feeling your body grow heavier with each word, feeling your mind drift further from wakefulness, feeling yourself becoming part of this great chorus of rest that circles the planet every night. You're not fighting anymore. You're not resisting. You're just allowing yourself to be tired, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, allowing yourself to sleep. The animals know that morning always comes. That rest always ends in waking. That sleep is not death, but its opposite, the process that makes continued life possible. They sleep without fear because they trust this rhythm. They've trusted it for millions of years, and it has never betrayed them. It won't betray you either. So let your eyes close, if they haven't already. Let your breathing deepen. Let your thoughts become disconnected, random, dreamlike. Let yourself drift like the otter wrapped in kelp, like the bird riding thermals, like the sloth swaying gently in the canopy. Let yourself trust the way the bear trusts when it enters its den, the way the dolphin trusts when it closes one eye, the way every animal trusts when it surrenders to sleep. You're safe here. The world will continue without your vigilance for the next few hours. Your problems will still be there tomorrow, but so will you, rested, restored, ready to face them with the kind of energy that only comes from true rest. The animals know this. They know that rest is not avoidance, but preparation, not weakness, but wisdom, not the end of the day, but the foundation for the next one. Thank you for joining this journey through the sleeping world of animals. Thank you for spending this time exploring the remarkable ways that life finds rest in every environment, every situation, every circumstance. May your sleep be as peaceful as the sloth in its canopy, as trusting as the otter holding hands with its family, as deep as the bear in winter, as wise as the dolphin that knows when to rest and when to stay alert. The animals are sleeping, and so can you. Good night.